Hello and welcome to the Styrian Grand Prix pre-race preview presented by the Outside the Cockpit and the Intermission Sports. I'm joined by TJ Deere and my name is Sam Donzik. How are you doing today, DJ?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm excited for a great weekend of racing. There's a 40% chance of rain all throughout the weekend, so I'm hoping maybe a little bit of rain should make for an exciting weekend. But let's get right into our qualifying predictions. So talking about pole position here, who do you have sitting up on pole position, and even the rest of the grid as well to finish up the podium?
Well, I mean, Max Verstappen led both practice sessions today, and that Red Bull looks amazing around this track. They do have history here as well. Last year, obviously, they didn't hit the ground running, which is why they didn't win. But the previous two races before that, 2018 and 19, Verstappen won the race. So, and he'll definitely have a better chance if he gets into pole position, which I do think he'll get. Lewis Hamilton obviously will be in second base because of that. And then regarding Valtteri Bottas, he has that 3-place grid penalty for that pit lane incident.
Yes, he does.
So that'll obviously put him down. So because of that, I think Sergio Perez, he now knows the Red Bull, so he's going to get it up to what will be P3 in qualifying.
I would definitely agree with you. I think Max Verstappen he's going to have a strong weekend. I think Lewis Hamilton does have a strong chance to put it on a pole, but again, like being the Red Bull ring, it is a very Red Bull favorable track and stuff. Like Red Bull does have a lot of success there. So I believe that's where Max Verstappen is going to be up on pole position. For the rest of the grid, I see Lewis Hamilton in Lewis Hamilton second. I maybe see Checo Perez in third, but I also maybe potentially see Lando Norris or Daniel Ricciardo if I'm really going to be, because it seems like they've had some good weekends in the past. There and stuff, like Lando Norris, especially last lap Lando. So I would say, in my thoughts, Lando Norris could stick it on to P3, which would be exciting to see. After kind of a bit of a disappointing French Grand Prix, like he did finish P5, but it wasn't the best in his books as well. So I would say, yeah.
You could also throw in an Alpine as well, whether it be Ocon or Alonso. Both of them did really well in second practice today, and that Alpine does seem to be a lot better than it was from the start of the season. So something could happen there as well.
Yeah, it seems like they've made some major upgrades and stuff throughout this so far, the 6-7 races this season. And Fernando Alonso and Esteban Ocon have really been showing their strides, and they've been getting used to the car, I think. That's what it takes. Like, same with Sergio Perez and Sebastian Vettel. Now they've gotten used to their new teams and their new cars, you're starting to see them see success. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Sebastian Vettel up there in like the top 5 position. But you can't also count out Pierre Gasly. It would be really cool to see him in that top 5 position. Let's move on to our race predictions. So who do you have taking home the race win this Sunday?
Like going back to qualifying as well as the race history, I got Verstappen taking home victory once again. He's really hit some good form, especially this entire season he's been the one to beat. Hamilton has not been the one to beat. That Mercedes, something's gone wrong at Mercedes. I don't know. I feel like on race trim and even in qualifying trim as well, they've had some whether they've had some issues or not, or whether just Red Bull have really, really hit the ground running. That's really caught Mercedes off guard, and they sort of don't know how to react. And we've seen that with Valtteri Bottas this season so far, with all the incidents he's had and the struggles he's had, especially earlier today with the incident in the pit lane. So you feel like Verstappen is going to take victory based on the last few races. But I mean, you can't count out Lewis Hamilton in any situation. He is a natural born fighter. And Mercedes do have a history of fighting back from a dip in form. So you simply cannot count out Lewis Hamilton, but I'm still going Max Verstappen. And then obviously, we mentioned last lap Lando. I've got him taking the third podium spot. I think he's going to hit form once again. He did really well at this track last year, and he's still the only driver to score points in every race this season, and he's really hit some good form this season. And
yes, he has.
I got him taking that final podium spot. It's a long shot, yes, but I think he'll pull it off again.
It'd be interesting. For my race predictions, I would say, yeah, Max Verstappen is going to take the race win in my thoughts, and from what I've seen so far this weekend and possibly in qualifying as well. If he gets pole position, he's going to win that race. Something has gone astray with Mercedes and stuff again, like between Bottas and Hamilton switched chassis actually last weekend at the French Grand Prix. That clearly didn't do anything, didn't make a difference, didn't help enough because of this. Like, it was just race strategy that lost him that race. But in terms of this weekend in this race, I see Checo Perez actually finishing a Red Bull 1-2, and then I see either Lando Norris, maybe Pierre Gasly finishing on a podium. A bit of a bold prediction. I mean, like, as much as I don't want to say don't count out Lewis Hamilton, because you never know, like, he might show up on Saturday and just absolutely dominate, get pole position and win the race, which we'd love to see because we want to see an exciting title fight. Like, even me as a Red Bull fan, I don't want to see just Max Verstappen run away with the championship. You know, I want it to be exciting all the way up until the season finale at the Yas Marina and stuff. And as well, like, with them making changes to make more exciting racing, I want to have a good season finale. I don't want to have like the same thing we have every year where it's like, you know, Lewis Hamilton is like the champion by like Turkey and stuff, you know, and then it's like, but so those are my race predictions and stuff to watch for. And that's kind of what I think. So I definitely think Pierre Gasly or Lando Norris for that final podium position for Sunday.
And especially with it being wet as well, there's a big chance of rain even tomorrow as well, where that could mess up qualifying. And on Sunday as well, there's a good chance of rain. So that could also potentially mess things up, get one of those outsiders up the field, or maybe a front runner could slip back. Wet races genuinely are exciting, and we saw that last year. We've seen that this year as well. So
yeah, no, and like one more point about like with wet racing and stuff in terms of qualifying, it's like Carlos Sainz is really good in the wet, and so is Max Verstappen. So I think if it does rain in any chance during qualifying and it is wet out there, I think those two will really do well. And I wouldn't be surprised if Carlos Sainz does well enough to get into Q3 on like a set of medium tires, and then that like for the race strategy on Sunday. I also think that despite the 3-place grid penalty, I know Valtteri Bottas usually struggles in the rain, and even with that 3-place grid penalty, I think it's just going to be tough for him to score points on Sunday or score a high amount of points to keep competitive with Red Bull. So Red Bull could be expanding their lead even more in the Constructors' Championship.
Yeah, you definitely see that happening, especially with Bottas, with that 3-place grid penalty and with all the recent struggles he's had this year. I mean, you feel like George Russell is going to get that seat sooner than later.
Definitely. It's getting very close. Let's move on to our drivers to watch for this weekend. For me personally, some drivers to watch for. I'm going to be watching to see how well Lando Norris does. I want to see that. I also want to see a couple of Pierre Gasly. Those kind of my two drivers to watch for, to see how the two young guns go, along with maybe Yuki Tsunoda. Those three drivers are my drivers to watch for. As much as I want to say like, oh, watch like Lewis Hamilton, watch Max Verstappen, but it's like, you know how those guys are going to be. They're going to be competing at the top level. I'm talking about like some of the midfield guys, you know, the guys who finish in like who battle for 4th and 5th and, you know, really competitive. And so those are my drivers to watch for. What about you, TJ?
Well, yeah, you mentioned the drivers in the midfield. That's where most of the excitement is generally. I mean, now we have this genuine fight for the championship, for both championships for once, which does generate some excitement. But the real buzz has always been about the midfield, especially now that McLaren has got a big gap over Ferrari thanks to Ferrari's miserable Sunday at Paul Ricard. So, I mean, yes, you genuinely have to look at an improved Daniel Ricciardo and an informed Lando Norris. But I mean, I also you just can't help. I can't help look away from the Alpines. I mean, they've had this really interesting sort of blip on Saturdays. They do really well, and then on Fridays, and then they sort of taper off. The rest of
throughout the weekend and stuff, through Saturday and Sunday, they kind of dip down and stuff. They struggle a little bit on Saturday, and then their racecraft on Sunday, like the race pace, isn't always there. And we've seen that as well with other drivers, where it's like they have a really good qualifying, but then like their race pace, like Charles Leclerc, for example, he's had some really good pole positions in Monaco and in Baku, but in Baku he just struggled for pace. Like I don't know, when the race pace just wasn't there with the Red Bull and the Mercedes as well. So it's just interesting to see and stuff for sure.
Well, yeah, Baku is also a street circuit, and there was a lot of debris or dust, and that caused issue, and that created that whole tire farce.
Definitely.
And then when you look at last time out, Ferrari, I mean, they were already struggling for straight line pace, as we saw in Azerbaijan, and then the miserable weekend they had last time out at Paul Ricard. So it's definitely a car that doesn't work well on the straights, but it does work well in the corners, which is why they did well in qualifying in Monaco, and then Sainz obviously went up to P2 in the race. So, I mean, Ferrari's had a bit of a downturn. So they've had this problem that they first only identified on Sunday at Paul Ricard, and now they've got 2 more races in a row. So this problem is not going to go away anytime soon. So you feel like McLaren is going to get the edge on Ferrari over these next 2 races in Austria, where straight line speed is so important.
Yes, definitely. Alrighty, let's go into our 3-word race predictions. If you can kind of predict how this race is going to go in about 3 words or less, or around 3 words, what are your 3 words they're going with?
I hope this happens because it is scheduled. Wet weather chaos. Everyone loves a wet race, and I want another wet race. We saw the madness that happened at Imola earlier this year. We saw the madness that happened at Istanbul Park last year, and now that Istanbul Park is coming back. Part of it was because of the resurfacing that they did just a few days before the race, which made the track even more slippery. But I'm really hoping for some wet weather chaos. Yes, it'll some hardcore fans might not like that, but because they want pure, unaffected racing. But wet races genuinely throw up exciting and unexpected results, and that could be a key moment in whether it's the championship fight or the midfield fight or the backmarker fight. It could be chaos, and everyone wants to, and I at least want to.
I would 100% agree with you. And I think some fans who say like, oh, I only like dry races. No, it's like, no, you don't. Like, when you have a chance to get a wet weather race, you want to see that, because that's where true drivers' skill and ability come out and drive. Like when we saw Brazil 2016, Max Verstappen, young kid, was able to go out and find grip where grip was just unimaginable. Just like whip right around, like, the move around Nico Rosberg and stuff on the outside down the Senna S's in Brazil and stuff at the So again, when you look at this, like, great moments come out and stuff. And again, not all drivers are the best in the wet, but it's just how their ability is. Some drivers are better, some drivers are worse. For my 3-word race prediction for this weekend is, I don't know, I'm trying to think of something that's like kind of catchy and stuff, but I would just say probably Max Verstappen. I'm trying to think of like a Red Bull double podium. I think Red Bull double podium is kind of like how I think is going to go. I think a Red Bull double podium. It's not as exciting as like the wet weather chaos, but I think that's where it's going to be. Red Bull is going to have a really strong weekend qualifying and on Sunday in the race. They're going to have a Red Bull 1-2, which is going to be really nice for the Constructors Championship. Hopefully, maybe it's a Mercedes 3-4, and then it will still be close and stuff, but it'll be still hopefully an exciting race. But it'd be great to see Checo even get another race win possibly, or even finish on the podium in second.
Well, a race win I think might be a bit of a stretch considering how he fared in practice, but he definitely could make it a 1-2 for Red Bull at their home race, and then it'll be really interesting to see how Mercedes respond next weekend at the exact same track. But just going back to that wet weather point, you mentioned that some drivers don't really handle the wet well, and we've mentioned Valtteri Bottas. He doesn't really do the wet very well from what we've seen. I mean, that only puts more pressure on him, going back to the whole silly season mess.
Yes, indeed,
and we saw last year with George Russell, when he was in a Mercedes, he did really well until it was pretty much taken away from him through no fault of his own. I mean, he needs to have a good weekend. From here on out, he needs to have good weekends in order to make Mercedes think twice about maybe replacing him, maybe keeping him on for another year. And then obviously the rule changes next year. That's going to also throw another spanner in the works. So, I mean, this is one of the most exciting seasons I can remember. And then obviously it's genuinely seems like it could go down to the wire, because Mercedes, like I said earlier, they do tend to respond when things are not going so well. So, looking at the calendar in the future, they need to get their stride going, and soon, if they want to make this genuinely exciting.
Yes, indeed. And to kind of continue to quickly talk about this whole Valtteri versus Russell thing, and I think it's interesting because when you look at George Russell and how well he did when he was in the Mercedes last year at the Styrian Grand Prix, and then again earlier this year at Imola and stuff, when he was fighting with Valtteri Bottas in 9th position, which really where Valtteri Bottas shouldn't have been, but George Russell made a crucial mistake, and kind of there was the accident there. So I do think that in terms of this whole silly season, Valtteri just needs to get in the right headspace, where he just needs to perform consistently. If he says, okay, if I can get second and third places or even second places, if I can just get second, you don't have to beat Lewis Hamilton because it's very hard. But you can beat Lewis Hamilton or be close to it, but not too close, obviously, because they don't want that. But if you can kind of just beat, Max Verstappen and Checo Perez, because that's the biggest problem. The biggest problem right now with Mercedes, and kind of Red Bull had this problem for a number of years, it's like they didn't have a second driver to support the first driver, right? So now what it is it's now Checo Perez, like Sergio Perez and Max Verstappen ganging up on Lewis Hamilton. And Toto's like, what do you do? Like, where are you, Valtteri? Because Valtteri is just struggling. And that's the biggest problem right now is if he isn't there to support like Lewis as the second driver, even though we all know he's the second driver, just how Checo is the Max. That's the big problem where it does cause some issues and stuff for Mercedes, and that's where like George Russell might step in and go, okay, yeah, we can be competitive and stuff. Because I know people were saying and stuff, and I was even saying for a long time, it's like, oh, they're not going to do that, the Russell versus Hamilton, Russell Hamilton lineup, because that's going to be a Rosberg Hamilton lineup by 2.0. But I think Russell's got the right mindset where he wants to learn from Lewis Hamilton as much as possible and understand, okay, listen, okay, I'm fine being a second driver, to Lewis Hamilton, but I'm just excited to be in a faster car in a Mercedes. So I'll just leave it on that point if you want to add anything else to that. Before we,
Yeah, I mean, obviously this could be if Russell does get that second drive in Mercedes, there are some concerns that you mentioned that it could be a Hamilton-Rosberg situation, Prost Senna, but Hamilton's in his 30s, Russell's just starting out. So, I mean, I don't think there will be that sort of antagonism.
Yes, indeed,
that some people fear. Like you said, obviously Russell has the best mindset. And then looking at Russell, when he leaves Williams, how are they going to respond? Who are they going to get? So, I mean, Mercedes pretty much kicked off this whole silly season thing by hinting that a decision about next year's lineup might come as early as the British Grand Prix, but they need to respond. The next two races after the Austria doubleheader are Silverstone and Hungary. Both are very happy hunting grounds for Mercedes.
Yes,
so
indeed, yeah.
they really need to get Bottas really needs to get a move on if he wants any hope of saving his drive for next year. But then it is interesting. Russell is doing really well in the Williams. He's always done very well in the Williams. Mr. Saturday, he's known.
Yeah.
So I mean, obviously something happens to the Williams on Sundays, which is why they haven't scored any points. But there have been times where Russell has dragged that Williams into points potential. Obviously, we saw it at Imola before. We all know what happened.
He finished P12 at Paul Ricard and stuff just outside the point. So for the car that he's driving, I think he's done a really good job at extracting as much pace as possible. Now think what he could do in a Mercedes, and we've seen what he can do in a Mercedes. And it's just the potential is there to become like a world champion or driver's world champion at such a young age. And I think that is a possibility where I think what Mercedes is doing is like, okay, we're going to bring Russell in. We're going to let Lewis mentor with Russell. And then Lewis is going to retire at some point. We'll maybe bring in a second driver to help Russell, have like a two young drivers lineup, or we'll bring in some veteran driver and stuff. It's really exciting to see what's going to be happening with Mercedes and again with the regulations for 2022 and stuff. But
that brings back Esteban Ocon back into the situation as well.
Yes,
he was let go by the Mercedes junior team, but he is still managed by Toto Wolff. So there is the possibility that he does end up in a Mercedes seat, or you could look at some of the other potential rejects who do have pace and have responded. Pierre Gasly obviously is the big name there, rejected by Red Bull. I don't think he's ever going to get that second Red Bull seat now because Red Bull don't really need to call him anymore because they have Sergio Perez, who's doing very well. And then it would look really bad on them to say, oh, wait, we changed our mind. We do need you back after all. We do like you now. So it would look really bad on them. He's never getting in that Red Bull. So a team like Mercedes could come calling, and that could make things really interesting with the new regulation changes. And then this whole, young talent wave.
No, definitely, yes.
It could really make things fun in the future.
No, definitely, 100%. And like the last point before we finish off with this whole thing with like silly season stuff, I definitely see Pierre Gasly not going back to Red Bull. Clearly, Red Bull made an error. They pushed him too hard at a young age, and I think that he could go elsewhere. And again, if Ocon is locked in until 2024, okay, maybe he can't go to Alpine. But then if Ocon leaves to go to Mercedes at 2024, let's say Lewis Hamilton retires, George Russell's there already, then you have Ocon and Russell at Mercedes, then you have a spot open at Alpine. Maybe, depending on how well Alpine's pace is, like Pierre Gasly might, okay, I'll push for the Mercedes seat, but if I don't get the Mercedes seat, then maybe I can go for the Alpine seat, depending on how Alpine's pace, because AlphaTauri has a decent pace already compared to Alpine, and they've kind of done well. They're not as close as McLaren, and maybe McLaren's another spot where potentially he might go, or maybe even Ferrari as well. Who knows? It's really just up in the air and stuff. Silly season can get pretty silly as well in Formula One. But that will do it for our show. For everyone, thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel and check out theintermissionsports.com for more content. Have a nice weekend, everybody. Peace out.